Hey guys, for my differentiated instruction tool, I am going to be talking about math stations. When I was looking through the different articles and PowerPoints, this was something that stuck out to me because this is something I do every single day in my class. I work with stations for math and for literacy, but today I'll be talking specifically about our math stations. So in this next slide, I did share part of the PowerPoint. I feel like this really summed it up on why they are important specifically for my classroom. So I work with eighth graders who have special needs, and I do need to work in very small groups or one-on-one with all of my students. My groups are no bigger than 4 students, and I do have a couple students that work one-on-one with me. So it's really nice. I can target their skills. I can work on them. I can work with them on their individual needs. Each of my groups are diverse and differentiated between each group. So no group has the same supports, which I think is important as well. Within my stations, my students, they get their directions, they get their materials, and they're able to locate their station around the room. Of the 2 stations that were mentioned in this PowerPoint, I specifically work with rotation stations. So the way that I set up my rotation stations is I have, depending on the day, 3 to 4 different stations around the room. I have board maker cards that I laminated and added Velcro pieces to, and my students, so each station has a different shape, and my students will then have a schedule, is what we call it, and they have the shape of their first station, second station, third station, of how they will rotate throughout. What's nice about this is that it's flexible. So if I have a student that typically works in a small group, but I want to work one-on-one with them that day, I can change those shapes around so that their rotation is different. Um, so this format is definitely more structured, and working with students with um, disabilities, it's very, very important to have structure, just like any classroom. Um, but I find that if we shy away from that structure or that day-to-day task, some of my students it'll turn their entire day upside down. And it's just really important to have that structure throughout my room. And so I feel that these stations are very important. Um, you can do rotations over a course of a 3 to 5 day period, like it said in the PowerPoint. I specifically will only do that for my units. I will not stick to one concept for 3 to 5 days. When it comes to math, when it comes to literacy, that's a totally different ball game. But when it comes to math, I try to stick to one concept a day, just to keep the ball moving um, throughout the unit. So on this next slide, this is my rotation schedule for math. We do it right before lunch. We start off at 10:30 to 10:45. Usually this lasts about 10 to 15 minutes. And it's just a mini lesson with the whole group. So what we do here is we will introduce the topic to the students. They will write down their objectives and goals for this lesson. We will do a mini explicit instruction without getting too in depth, and then we will move on to the rotation. So from 10:45 to 11:15ish is when these rotations are being met. I do meet with my students for about 10 to 15 minutes, short and sweet, not staying at one station for too long because I will lose interest. And what these stations are is my students will work one-on-one or in a small group with me, and that's more of that guided practice, independent practice, depending on how far along we will get. Um, it's more that one-on-one, getting that support from me. And then it also helps me assess my students too with how they are getting along with the concept. One of our other stations is more of a math game, math practice. Um, a lot of times I will have my students work on their IXL lessons or their Dreambox lessons, just so that they can still work towards those state assessments. Without shying away from our math concepts. I just think this is a really good time to incorporate that practice. And then for our other station is a brain break. So at this time, students can work through a game together. They can do a puzzle together. Sometimes I will give them tablet time. Usually this is on Fridays, kind of a celebration for our week. And things like that. Then sometimes when it's necessary, if our social worker, speech therapist, or OT needs to meet with any of the students, I will just add in an extra rotation, and that is when they get to meet with my students. So it's again very flexible. Love rotation stations. They seriously, really, really provide that structure throughout my day, and I cannot speak any more highly of it. At the end of those rotations, we will come back together as a whole group and we will wrap up. So we will go over those objectives again and those goals, and then we will move on. So, for strategies for implementing these stations, again, I took this from the PowerPoint. Um, they can go anywhere in the classroom for these stations. I always have specific ones set up so that we are not on top of each other. We have our private space. The students don't feel like they are being watched. Being in eighth grade, I do want to provide some sort of independence before they go off to high school. Again, this is flexible within my groupings or pairings if I want to work one-on-one. And then, yes, so math blogs. So at the end of our wrap up, my students have about 30 minutes before they have to go to lunch. Within that 30 minutes, my students will log what they did. So what they worked on with me, what game they played, and then what brain break activity they did at their third station. And then if they worked with any other support. This also will go to their parents, that their parents can also be involved in what they're doing throughout the day. Once they're done with logging, then they are able to grab an incentive until it's time for lunch. Something about these stations is I did mention briefly, but I do assess my students at this time. It just gives me an idea of where they are when it comes to their schoolwork and outside of their schoolwork. Are they focused? Are they not? Especially with those one-on-one students, I get more of that personal time with them where they can open up to me. So I really do like these stations for many reasons, not just when it comes to schoolwork. But yeah, so I hope you guys learned a little something about stations if you're not familiar with it. And I can't wait to hear about all of your tools. Thanks, guys.